We take off into the skies over Wiltshire at the beginning of the 2001 season. I'm overcome by a feeling of uncertainty for the first time since I have been researching this phenomenon. This countryside below has become blighted and restricted to access because of a viral disease called foot and mouth, which affects livestock on a huge scale. This dreadful situation is surrounded by great sadness for the farming community of this country. It results in people not being able to use the public rights of way across the countryside, as humans could spread the disease to animal livestock without being personally affected. By the time the Berwick Bassett Formation arrived, access restrictions to public rights of way had been relaxed, so you could almost feel the relief from the Cropsey community when this design formed. During the month of May, the farmers were still extremely sensitive towards the possibility of a disease spreading between the farms, so it's very important to capture the events from the air. In order to respect the farmers' wishes, we kept our ground visit to the formations as brief as possible. This formation was positioned extremely close to the main road, so walking distance wasn't a problem. You could clearly see how well defined this formation was within immature barley. Its growth at the end of May creates this type of floor construction. And what an example it was. The entire inner design incorporated a series of convex triangles and twisted to produce this swirling movement, which can only be appreciated from the air. Indeed, the shape reminded me a little of the Wankel rotary engine, but for what reason one can only speculate. Occasionally, while flying over Wiltshire, we capture these shapes in the landscape. This example was a track in a loop, which is one of many unusual features we witnessed from the air. This was quickly known as the Ouroboros, which is the Grecian word for the serpent devouring its tail. However, the symbol was first seen in Egypt as early as 1600 BC. We can clearly see the serpent biting its own tail, but there are a number of interpolations to this design, the foremost being the creative and destructive force of nature, or indeed heaven and earth combined. It can also represent all is one, which can be used to describe the meaning in the Alexandrian time of Egyptian history. The weather at this time made it extremely difficult to take these shots, but we can just make out the details that make up the design in young barley. By this stage, the 24th of June, the weather was certainly improving, and within this design we can again see echoes of the Berwick Bassett Formation, with the convex triangle dominating the central part of the design. The construction of this formation clearly demonstrates how incredibly precise it is, with a small tuft of standing crop in the central circle, and the person providing scale within the hot midday summer sunshine. Now, this design was not only the first formation to appear on the gallops, close to the village of Beckhampton, but it was also directly in our flight path, so we found ourselves flying over this pattern several times throughout the 2001 season. Its overall design incorporated a fine pointed star, created by 16 circles in total, and with 5 half-moon shapes on the end of each arm. Because of its early appearance in young wheat, the crop was rapidly recovering. This normally occurs at this time of its growth in late June. However, the amount of visitors to the site kept the crop fairly well flattened within the design. On visiting formations, not only do we have to be aware of the overall design, but also the intricacies in the details in the floor construction. At the gallops, we discovered an unusual white powder bloom on the stems throughout the entire formation. At the slightest touch, one could remove or mark the bloom. There was no sign of any disturbance on the bloom or the plants we domesticated. This is an excellent litmus test in establishing if the crop circles are flattened by any mechanical means. These unusual events are examples of the kind of mysterious anomalies which occasionally we come across during our field research. So it's always important to be aware of the overall environment in and around the formations. This was indeed a striking design, and we were able to watch it mature throughout the summer months as we flew over it many times on our way to other events during the 2001 season. It took us quite a long time to find this little gem, hidden away from the roadside, but turned out to be one of my favourites throughout the entire 2001 season. This small delightful dumbbell was located very close to the lay centre of Knoll Down near Beckhampton. It was certainly a wonderful pattern, not only because of its quiet location, but the amount of features it included within the whole of its floor construction. At the very top of the Dunbar was a halo with arcs on each side. This was a feature we hadn't seen before, but the whole design reminded us of the early years of crop circling in Wiltshire. It was most definitely a throwback to an earlier time in my life, when I was fresh and new to this amazing phenomenon. By 2001 we had become extremely used to viewing these huge complex formations, but it's always a pleasure to be brought back to earth with patterns like this. Some 11 days after Knoll Down, this enormous formation appeared below the slopes of the Gog Magog Hills in Cambridgeshire. These hills were named after two ancient British giants famous for the City of London. This was one of the largest formations to appear. It is a mysterious 666 feet in diameter. The huge ring was the first to be constructed, before a series of unusual patterns appearing inside. It was followed by a masterpiece of a labyrinth over 200 feet in diameter and meticulously thought out. It took the best part of 20 minutes to find the centre, but the overall construction was very impressive, with clean-cut directional paths around the entire shape. Once again a masterstroke for the circuit makers. The labyrinth position inside the ring was very carefully considered, and it was located just inside the main outer ring, with just a small cutting of crop separating the two. The formation was extremely eclectic, with its collection of additions appearing over the following weeks. This small shape was placed just outside the main ring, close to the labyrinth, but on further analysis, the design was pointing towards the second large formation to appear inside the ring. The second pattern within the ring was even more mind-bending in its shape, but was in complete contrast to the others. 6 outer rings or paths frame the inner square shape, cut into 4 quadrants to create this 3-dimensional effect from the air. In fact, it creates the illusion of a rotational shape in 3D. It was a curious design indeed, and was very perplexing from the ground, but once again its floor construction was masterful with beautiful control. It too was situated very close to the outer ring. This was a striking and awe-inspiring shape to witness in the hot, dry day in the Cambridgeshire sunshine. A week later, this incredible design formed, known as the Angel, and appeared on the other side of the Gog Magog Hills. This rather elegant pattern appearing on the 15th of July in wheat on the northwesterly side of Wimber Hill in Wiltshire. Many thousand years ago, this area lay at the crossroads of the Neolithic world. It was the cradle of that phenomenal explosion of the Neolithic culture at Avebury. The formation was positioned below its slopes, on the remotest side of the hill, but nevertheless the people still managed to seek it out. They had come to see what we believe to be probably the best design so far set in Wiltshire. It incorporates a central axis of meandering paths, but the pattern had a certain harmony to it, especially the centre where, quite mysteriously, everyone wanted to congregate. One could sense the relief after just having been told that we had 4 access to the fields now, and that after many dreadful months, foot and mouth disease had been eradicated from the English countryside. Even though July was fine to walk through the public footpaths, some farmers were still rather nervous about allowing people onto the fields, but this formation was 100% approved by the farmer for the public to enter. Indeed, it would have been a crying shame if we hadn't seen this from the ground, as it was always exciting to view formations in places they hadn't been seen before. This formation near the village of Yatesbury clearly reveals echoes of the Causeway Enclosure Formation. Although this time there is no central axis, but we can witness interlocking shapes, very similar to its predecessor at Wimble Hill. These two events were certainly connected to each other. Access was prohibited at Yatesbury, as many farmers were still concerned about people entering the fields. The reports we received on our website stated to the floor construction at this stage was quite erratic in places. If we were to compare the two, the Yatesbury formation looked inferior as seen from the ground. This was very confusing, especially when these two formations were extremely impressive from the air. The emergence of these two formations demonstrated that the 2001 season was now in full momentum, as the following weeks brought surprises never before witnessed by the Cropsey community. The Clay End formation near the Roman city of Bath was part of an intriguing chain of events which has never been witnessed before in the history of the phenomenon. The formation we see here was most definitely attached itself to a random trail of joyriding tracks. These appeared a week before and were probably made by the criminal element of the Bath community. In a bizarre set of circumstances, I believe these tracks were part of what I call the interaction effect, which took place in this field. It is a clear example of the phenomenon's ability to be aware of our actions, whether honourable or not. The design itself was very impressive, visually and on the ground, as the floor construction was extremely compressed to the ground, which is a characteristic of the maturity of the crop at this time of the year. The field was incredibly ripe and very close to harvesting, but the formation was one of the largest to appear in the area and contains certain elements which we have seen many times before. This formation was very important in understanding why the circle makers are sometimes attracted to features in the landscape. We have witnessed this many times before. The fascinating aspect to its positioning in the fields was its blatant referencing to the car tracks within the fields, as one particular circle cuts through the track itself. One can only be amazed at the amount of formations that have appeared in the wake of Silbury Hill. This particular field directly opposite the earthen mound had been hit countless times since the late 80s. It is probably one of the most prolific fields to be hit by the circle makers in and around the Avebury area. But the field was always reminded in my eyes of the most dramatic because of Silbury Hill as its backdrop. Situated on the higher slopes of the field, this formation was regarded as a bit of a misfit compared to the other far more impressive and articulate creations. It is a combination of thought bubble circles on each apex of the equilateral triangle. The overall result was not aesthetically pleasing, but perhaps we are concentrating too much on the design element, thereby possibly neglecting hidden messages in structures like this. The circle makers are fully aware of the events that have taken place at Silbury, as indeed they are aware of ourselves. This latest pattern reminded myself of spinning energy as seen from the air, with this radiating circles from each apex. Only a few days before this event, a UFO sighting was witnessed at Silbury Hill. This formation was received with great excitement, as its significance took on a power of its own, with many people believing that the shape has some kind of connection to the hill. The question is were we actually witnessing a sign indicating a power source from Silbury hidden in the message of the formation. Not only was there a possible message inherent in the formation, but it was also a good example of how the phenomenon actually uses two different crops for its floor construction. There was an anomaly which was quite rare, and that was one of the arms was cutting into a neighbouring wheat field. Therefore, one of its circles was created with half barley, half wheat. It was a fascinating detail to witness at Silbury Hill. This design at Beckhampton resembled two roses of the Tudors in the 16th century. but the reasons for its appearance in the Wiltshire fields is a complete mystery. The location in the field has never been hit before by the circle makers. Situated just outside the village of Beghampton, but tucked away from the road, Silbury Hill can be seen in the northeasterly direction though. Overall, these fields have been very lightly used by the phenomenon, and may continue to do so over the years to come. The red rose variety as a symbol is the most ancient of all cultivated roses seen today. It was thought that to have been brought over from Europe by the Crusades in the 12th century. The white rose dates back to the 15th century. It was thought that these two roses were incorporated into the design at Beghampton. Many people came from all parts of the world to do detailed field research like ground surveys and sampling for laboratory analysis. Everyone received this shape with great enthusiasm. It was certainly in a picturesque location and had a very calming atmosphere inside. The formation was between the small villages of Alton Barnes and Lockridge, on a stretch of road frequently visited by the circle makers. The field itself is on the slopes of the old village of Shaw, dating back to medieval times, with remnants of its foundations located on the top of the hill. This field has witnessed a few formations over the last 12 years, but this has to be the finest to appear on these slopes. The makeup of the design included 16 arms of individual raised cylindrical clumps of crop, diminishing in size towards the centre, and out to its perimeter. This resulted in a very striking design, but it's a technique that would take on a whole new significance as we shall see later in the programme. On the ground it was equally fascinating, as the crop meandered around each of the clumps of crop with amazing fluidity, with this portion of crop in between the cylindrical shapes laid at 90 degrees. The centre was cleverly produced, with great control needed to create the 8 arrowheads, which set the design off beautifully, and we could see at close range the detail on the ground. The location is always a place of great celebration for the phenomenon. But on this hot and sticky day, it was rather mad dogs and Englishmen out in the midday sun. A beautifully constructed design, appreciated by everyone, particularly from the air. As we approached the end of July, the summer was at its hottest, which can make field research rather uncomfortable in extreme heat. It was an intriguing design though, not only because of its beautiful symmetry and balance, but also its ability to draw people into the design. We can see influences of the infinity symbol, which could possibly represent the infinite structure of the universe, and how worlds within worlds is a real possibility in mainstream science now. From the ground, the pole shots indicate the main axis track that was underlying and connecting all the small symbols on the central column. It was a beautiful location in the July sunshine, but extremely photogenic, as many angles could be achieved from the accessible tram lines. This is very important for us to capture and provides a comprehensive record for our viewers. As we rotate around the design, we can enjoy the different aspects of the pattern in the hot midday sunshine. In the first 2 weeks of August, the summer was still incredibly hot. Suddenly we found ourselves investigating this delightful formation below the slopes of Knapp Hill. This is one of the oldest hill forts in Britain, and a location well known to the circle phenomenon. This is the first time we have seen the style of the thought bubbles positioned in such a way within the formation. It creates a very successful momentum to the design, and is generally pleasing to the eye. One could have great vantage point from the hillside, but it wasn't apparent how large this formation was until you were actually inside. At around 160 foot in diameter, it was no small event. The floor construction was very well done though, and at this stage in the first week in August, we tend to have very hot, dry, straw-like crop, as the plant's maturity is fast approaching harvesting stage. The pattern draws the viewer into the inner sanctum, and these diminishing identical shapes leave the impression of the infinite. The weather turned decisively inclement in the second week in August. This resulted in dull conditions, as we preferred brighter days for filming. The formation at Browns Lane was very difficult to photograph, but a window of opportunity arose and we could eventually view it from the ground. This was the first formation to appear in the last field along from Adam's grave. Browns Lane is the main access road to Alton Barnes, but this pattern was so secluded that no passing motorist could appreciate this latest offering. On studying the floor layout, we discovered the design included the sacred symbol of the Vesica Pisces, which represents the joining of God and the goddess to create the offspring. It also represents a source of immense power and energy, and indeed an example of this type of design provides a clear indication of how far the phenomena has progressed. On the southern side of Woodborough Hill, the fields are very secluded and hard to reach from the roads. This formation gracing the shadow of Woodborough was quite a gem, and first initial reports were not favourable to its size and quality. We visited this formation on a gloomy summer's day and were pleasantly surprised by its construction and size. But it seemed a shame that it was in such a remote location. We were also surprised by its construction. It had a fluidity to its floor pattern flowing around these perimeter circles, creating a wonderful movement throughout the design. An event that was very impressive in dull weather, however, it didn't dampen our enthusiasm for this formation. The arrival of these two formations appearing on the same night was received with utter disbelief. We had never witnessed at this time in 2001 glyphs of such magnitude. This particular glyph was thought to have been a direct reply from the Arecibo message sent by NASA in 1974 by the world's largest radio telescope. The implications of this actually being an intercepted reply was extremely tantalizing and became one of the most talked about event in the crop circle world. On the ground, the pattern was totally incomprehensible and certainly unique with regard to its construction to the whole design. The flattened parts were running at 90 degrees to the standing sections, with a channel of crop around the four sides, framing the entire glyph. Its message was of such profound nature that it took the world by storm, appearing on TV channels and documentaries around the world. What they were suggesting was that this glyph was either representing the makeup of the beings that sent it, or perhaps the ultimate evolutionary human process of a distant future for all of us. To have one stunning event in this field is quite enough, but to have two on one night was really quite extraordinary, and the face brought a whole new angle to the mystery. The entire pattern was made of these cylindrical clumps created at various dimensions to achieve the correct density of the features of the face. Indeed, on the ground, no one would have ever known of this true design, but the detail inside was extremely complex, with multi-layering around the shapes in what appeared to be a rather erratic manner, but very effective to the overall concept from the air. It really was like no other formation from the 2001 season, or indeed any previous season. Or are we looking at a reflection of ourselves from an alternative dimension? Its ultimate message was in contrast to the glyph next door that was based on a reply from a human communication experiment. We have held back showing you the big one till last, which occurred a few days before the face. On the morning of the Sunday the 12th of August, an event took place on the top of ancient Tan Hill, near Milk Hill, that finally brought the phenomenon back to the people. An event so stunning so breathtaking, so articulate, so vast, that everyone to whom we spoke and replied to the initial report were utterly impressed and in awe of what occurred in this field in the second week of August. This formation took everyone's breath away and was without a shadow of a doubt the greatest formation since the crop circles began. It was the mother of all crop circles and covered an area of nearly 7,000 square feet. Whatever numbers you find within the sheer scale of this formation, it will certainly have a lot of zeros behind it. You really could not appreciate the size of this formation without being inside it. Just standing in any part of it and witnessing circles all around you was quite extraordinary, and you could say visions of dreams. In fact, many people we met inside Milk Hill had reoccurring dreams of fields covered in crop circles, so for them it was just as powerful. The formation consisted of 409 record-breaking circles, using the fractal style, very similar to the 1996 fractal at Windmill Hill, although the overall shape is not generally recognised as a fractal. The circles ranged in sizes from 70 feet to just 4 feet in diameter, but the formation was so huge that we had to fly to an altitude of 1,000 feet to be able to capture it in full frame. Yet the appearance of this megaglyph was an amazing and remarkable event. Just as startling was the night of its creation. It was the worst weather of the entire 2001 season, with persistent rain all night, and so heavy that we had to slow down on the motorway to just 40 miles an hour. This provides an idea of what it would have been like out in the fields that very night. The first people to enter the pattern on the morning of the 12th of August reported a pristine formation with no signs of soil disturbance. To walk around the entire perimeter of the circles takes over 30 minutes. This gives you an idea of just how large this formation was. The topography of the field only allowed you to see certain parts of it, with visitors as tiny dots on the horizon, as you viewed them from one side to another. Not even your shouts could be heard. A truly breathtaking and majestic formation in a location set well away from the busy crop circle season below. But its lofty positioning was befitting for a formation that took the whole world by surprise, and certainly set new standards for things to come from the circle makers, as we wondered whatever could be achieved next in the fields of England. We take one last look at this amazing formation as we fly by the seat of our pants at just 10 feet above the ground, and can truly understand the scale and grandeur of this pattern on the summit of Town Hill. We are flying at around 30 miles an hour, and just watch how long it takes to clear the entire formation. As we return to the airfield at the end of a stunning season, probably the most awe-inspiring season we have witnessed over the last 14 years, we reflect on how the crop circles have changed many people's lives and taught us how to look deeper into the issues and questions they have raised for all of us. Certainly, we have to be thankful for the incredible formations that have been seen and researched throughout the 2001 season, but this is exactly what keeps us coming back year after year.